Status Coup has obtained a document prepared for Senator Sherrod Brown by his staff ahead of a meeting that just took place between the senator with several East Palestine residents all present earlier this week. In that document, there's some conversation around the CDC recommendations, which have made it difficult for residents of East Palestine to actually get any sort of urine testing to show whether or not the levels of a metabolite created by vinyl chloride exposure have been elevated or not. This test would indicate potential exposure over a longer period of time to vinyl chloride as the ongoing cleanup still takes place. Again, this has been something that's been really difficult for residents to try to get. Residents have had to go and talk to multiple doctors, multiple labs, just to try to get these sorts of tests done. Fortunately, a few residents have been able to get to test, and unfortunately, it is showing elevated levels of this indicator of vinyl chloride exposure. Before we get to those results, let's start off with a clip here, a couple short clips here from resident Eric Koza that spoke with Jordan earlier this week. These are clips of this resident trying to get these tests done at a local doctor's office. We can go ahead and play those clips.
Mercy Labs do not do that.
See here, when I talked to the other person from the Mercy Health, they told me it was because under this the guidelines of the CDC.
Who did you talk to from Mercy?
I talked to whoever the lady is on that you call and you get the automated
Call center?
Yeah.
Oh, they're from Cincinnati. They have no clue what we're doing. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I'm just telling you that other
Yes.
people got tested for this, and
They didn't do it through a Mercy lab. Okay?
okay. Here's
All they're
what I
saying
was
is
told
the
by
same
this
thing as
lady.
CDC.
Here's where the CDC also gave you guys that guideline not to do that.
So all they said was that the CDC doesn't recommend it, and that it now, from just speaking with our doctors that are here today, they said that, it has to go through who your provider is. So whoever your provider is, we could send them a message and see if, but we can't do the testing here. We don't have the
No,
stuff to do the
I
testing.
understand that, but can I get a prescription from my doctor from here to get that done, and I'll pay for it out of pocket?
And that's what we just discussed. We would have to. Who do you see here? You see
Amy.
Amy. So she's not here today. So I didn't get to get her, her opinion or whatever she's.
Because I know it costs
going about.
$600 to get this done,
It's very expensive.
and I
yes.
don't care to pay it because the CDC is saying that there is a time frame, and I feel that they're holding us back from us because that we're going to test positive in our urine, and there's no time frame there.
Like I said,
I'm not killing the messenger
no,
at all.
I know. We don't have all the information yet. This is all new to everybody,
Jordan has actually done a full interview with this resident, Eric, which will be linked below if you'd like to see that after you watch this video. Again, as I mentioned, unfortunately, Eric, as well as others that we've talked with from Status Coup, and we've also obtained some of their test results, have tested positive for this metabolite that indicates a presence of vinyl chloride. We'll get into more of those details further on here. But first, let's actually get into that document that was provided to Senator Brown that Status Coup obtained that actually gets into a couple of the details involved with this CDC guidance that explains a little bit about why these test results or these tests in general are difficult to have done. It seems a little bit ridiculous. Let's go ahead and actually read some of the document here. So we can see right here, it says that residents have been attempting to access blood and urine testing from healthcare providers, but have been denied lab services or even a doctor's order for the tests due to Regional Poison Control Center clinical guidance handed down to providers from CDC. The guidance states that blood and urine testing for specific compounds may not be clinically useful because of lack of accuracy, long turnaround times, difficulty with interpretation, lack of information about baseline levels in the general population, inability to rule out exposure or guide clinical management. The guidance states that it is reasonable to order tests to evaluate organ effect as needed, such as liver function tests, kidney function tests, and complete blood counts. When I look at that, I see a major red flag, because if you were to take those bullet points at face value and apply those metrics to any other test that's happened in East Palestine so far, you would also probably convince yourself not to do those tests. Let's take a look at residential air tests. You're talking about accuracy. We've got all sorts of information now saying that PIDs, photoionization detectors, that are being used in residential home tests are not picking up chemicals at certain levels, aren't going to necessarily be accurate with all sorts of different chemicals. can only test for, if it's doing a broad test for VOCs, it might pick up vinyl chloride at one level and other things at other levels, which will mess with the results. And in general, it also is never going to pick up a lot of the chemical byproducts of vinyl chloride combustion. When vinyl chloride is set on fire, I've said this multiple times, but it also creates several other chemicals, including hydrogen chloride, formaldehyde, phosgene. Formaldehyde, you can only use that with a special attachment on it. If you're using the special attachment, you can't test for any of the other chemicals of concern, so that tells me that they're not testing for formaldehyde in homes. It also will never pick up phosgene, according to multiple experts that I've spoken with, both on and off the record. So accuracy, for vinyl chloride urine tests, they're concerned about it, but apparently not for making the decision to tell residents that it is safe for them to return home. Another one on accuracy. We've got Dr. Welton with Purdue University doing independent testing of the creeks and streams that run through East Palestine, including in Sulphur Run and Leslie Run. And the tests that he's doing, which I trust a whole lot more than the tests of the EPA or the Ohio EPA, are coming back with one number, and then the tests from the Ohio EPA are coming back with vastly different numbers. In some cases, Dr. Welton's results were twice as high as the Ohio EPA's results. But they're worried about a lack of accuracy when we're talking about, testing if these people have been exposed to vinyl chloride. Where's the concern over lack of accuracy when you're testing the creeks? I don't see any concern coming from that at all. Other issues here that are being brought up can easily be solved as well. They talk about long turnaround times. Why don't you just make it a priority? This town has clearly gone through a horrific event by no fault of their own, fully the fault of Norfolk Southern. Let's, use the weight of the federal government to maybe clear up some space to make some of these lab tests a priority. But no. There's too many issues with that. We can't ask to do anything to help these people, right? Difficulty of interpretation is another one that they said. Well, how about your job is to explain it to people in a way that they can understand? It's not that difficult. But again, that hasn't concerned them when it comes to well water testing that's been provided to residents. The EPA has contracted out to several different companies, and these folks are actually starting to get the results back now. And unfortunately, it seems like you need a PhD to be able to understand them. Difficult to interpret. And that's not me saying this. This is, again, Dr. Welton, who I just referenced from Purdue University. He is having residents reach out to him asking, hey, I don't know how to read this. Can you help me read this? And even he is needing to spend a whole bunch of time going through this because they're being provided with lists of hundreds of chemicals, honestly in a very tiny font too, on this massive page, trying to find it, not giving specifics as to what level is considered high or what level is considered low, having the chemicals being measured in different formats where you're needing to convert, is this one measured in in milliliters to, something else, or is this one being measured in grams or whatnot of the levels of these chemicals, where it's difficult for them to interpret. It was so bad to the point that Dr. Welton wrote an open letter to Michael Reagan, the head of the US EPA, and he actually described the response as, and I'm going to quote here, a substandard and poorly thought out execution of the response. Again, describing it as substandard and poorly thought out. This is a PhD professor at Purdue University. This isn't just some schmuck. He deals with this sort of thing and goes in and tests in these sorts of situations on a regular basis. So again, not concerned about accuracy when it comes to, residential air testing or any of these other things, but they're worried about it when it comes to urine testing. Not concerned about long turnaround times when it comes to these other tests because folks have had to wait forever to get them. Not concerned about difficulty of interpretation. They mentioned baseline levels. Residents had to, that was something that got brought up with dioxins as well. Residents had to beg to get dioxin testing done, and that was a concern that they had with dioxin testing, but they ended up doing them anyway. So every single one of those points is also a concern when it comes to every other test that's essentially been done in town. But here, for whatever reason, no. We can't do that. So now that you know all of those elements of this that seem to be, shady at best to not do these vinyl chloride urine tests, but they're willing to do all these other tests, Status Coup did reach out to the CDC to ask for some clarification, see why their clearly poorly thought out guidance on this is the way that it is. We reached out not once, not twice, but 3 times to the CDC over the last week or so, and we have received exactly 0. I'll say it again, we've exactly received 0 responses from the CDC on this. None. Nothing. Not even like a boilerplate, copy-paste email, which, that's what we're used to getting in some cases, although we're getting a lot more information as we get much more detailed here into some of the specifics when we're reaching out to the EPA, the Ohio EPA, all of these different places. We're working on some stuff that you definitely want to stay tuned for coming up over the next week or so, hopefully. But we're not even getting a boilerplate response from them. We're getting nothing. And to me, that's probably because the CDC realizes how much of a joke this is. They realize that they don't have anything to stand on to back up this argument. They have nothing. Anyway, let's get into some of the details of these actual vinyl chloride tests. Alright, so this test that's being done isn't actually just searching for vinyl chloride in your urine, like the actual chemical. Instead, what it's doing is searching for a metabolite, which is created in your body by vinyl chloride. Just think of it as something that your body creates when it's exposed to a chemical like this. So that metabolite that is being searched for is called thiodiglycolic acid. I believe I'm saying that right, but it probably could be wrong. From here on out, I'll either say the full name or I'll say TDGA, thiodiglycolic acid. So the CDC, as we just mentioned, has expressed concerns with accuracy and interpretation. So we spoke to an expert who's got a chemistry PhD as well as a degree in toxicology, who's been very helpful in helping us decipher all of this information throughout the East Palestine derailment story, as well as some information on the Indiana chemical fire as well. That expert said, and I'm going to quote, "Urinary TDGA indicates exposure to substances containing electrophilic 2-carbon moieties. It cannot be unequivocally attributed to VC or VC-related compounds. However, it would be difficult to formulate a scientifically sound argument that the resident's urinary TDGA was not from VC/VC-related compounds. Urinary TDGA is typically seen as a biomarker of VC exposure, and given the resident's circumstances, it indicates VC exposure with near certainty." So just to try to put this in a little bit more plain English, urinary TDGA, this chemical, the metabolite being tested for, thiodiglycolic acid, the only thing that, it's not like vinyl chloride is the only thing that can create it. There are a handful of other chemical substances that can create it as well. However, the point that this person is trying to make here is saying that while, yes, it is possible that TDGA is being created by something else here, it would be highly unlikely that that is the case, given the fact that what just happened in their town was 5 cars of vinyl chloride were set on fire and exploded like a bomb. Yes, they could have been all exposed to these other chemicals, but then why are multiple residents now who've finally been able to get some of this testing done being, showing positive tests for this sort of thing? I might work on a longer piece, a written piece, kind of explaining the intricacies of these tests, TDGA, all of this sort of stuff, because it is really complex. I'm not going to get into all of the details right here. I think it'd be much better served to have it all written down. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely let me know, and I'll try to work on something like that. But a huge miss here, and by summarizing some of the other emails and conversations that I've had with this expert, a huge miss here is that, a single snapshot that shows TDGA in your urine from one test, it's helpful, but it's only so helpful. This isn't a test that is done very frequently, fortunately, because, people don't deal with vinyl chloride exposure on a daily basis, and hopefully it stays that way. So rather than just having a snapshot of, yep, this person has this much in their urine at this time, what would have been much better is getting a series of these tests and tracking them over time. So to me, that's a huge, huge miss from the Ohio EPA, the federal EPA, the CDC, state officials. Back when DeWine touted his clinic that he opened during my first trip to East Palestine, that would have been a great opportunity to actually start doing tests. Instead, they did 0 tests. They didn't provide any blood or urine tests. But imagine a world in which a week, 2 weeks after the disaster happens, they start testing residents' urine for free every week over time. And now you've got, even if only half the residents did it, you've got roughly 2,000 people, and you've got all of this information about their vinyl chloride exposure levels over time. And you now have a real snapshot of what type of exposure is happening. Because right now what's happening is we're finally getting some tests from residents who are showing that still they're testing positive for vinyl chloride in their urine through this test, and it is indicating exposure that is still happening. This wouldn't be in their urine anymore had it just been exposure during that first week when this happened. They would not still be testing positive for it, but they are testing positive for it in the last few weeks here. So it's definitely something that we're going to continue to look into. I'm going to be back on the ground in East Palestine the first week in May. Jordan's going to be on the ground in Flint, Michigan, as well as Kalamazoo the week before, coming up here. Please, if you're just seeing this for the first time, press the subscribe button down below. If you're able to support the continuing on-the-ground reporting, again, I'm headed back. Jordan's headed to Flint again for, I don't even know how many times he's been, but he's reporting there for years and years and years at this point. If you are able to support that kind of reporting, consider becoming a member. StatusCoup.com/join is the way to do that for as low as $5 to $10 a month. You can also stay tuned with Status Coup or myself on Twitter, @StatusCoup or @LewisD217. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a good day.